Hello, my name is Chris Bennett, and I've been working on maybe what is the most important invention of all time for about 27 years. So, what does it have to do with President Clinton and the Swiss Air disaster? Recently, there was the UPS crash of MD-11. And in 1998, the Swiss Air Flight 111 was also an MD-11. And at the time, the pilots announced that the plane was on fire, and within approximately 20 minutes, it crashed off of Canada and New York. And over 200 people died. So this book is written by the father of a young man who died, Dr. David Wilkins, and he was a ophthalmologist, professor at Loma Linda University near me, and I talked to him on the phone a couple times. I hope that he's still alive. I haven't talked to him in a few years. He was getting to his 90s. But the FAA told Boeing that they had flammable insulation in all the MD McDonnell Douglas jets and mandated a solution. So it was the insulation which is throughout the hull of the jet, and it keeps the sound out and from the engines and the heat in at high altitudes. And let's see. So let me say this is a special message to the flight attendants and pilots and the air traffic controllers, especially them who have been, getting unpaid for over a month now, which is a disaster and is not right. Let me speak about that for a moment. It creates a lot of stress for them. So one thing you don't want is stress, because it creates distractions in your mind, and you can't do your job as well. So, and then plus the shortness of staff. So our leaders are playing a really dangerous game, and it's really proves that they need radical changes, a radical reality check to wake them up to what they're putting, millions of Americans through, with suddenly cutting off food stamps for millions of people, Trump fighting against that as long as he could, cutting off the pay for all those air traffic controllers and millions of other people, I think. Federal workers. Okay, that's basically a violation of the Constitution, isn't it? Which says you can't require people to work and not pay them. That's exactly what happened. So let's see. All those people deserve like 10 times their 2 months' salary, for even the people that had to suddenly go looking for another job. So it's just not right. So regarding Starlite, the reason why you've never heard of it and we've been blocked from getting on the market is because it's also one of the most important military technologies, because of all the different applications, which I won't get into. But the reason why I held this up is President Clinton's cousin at NASA, Raymond Clinton, Dr. Raymond Clinton. He's the deputy director of the Marshall Space Center for over 10 years, and then before that 20 years or 30 years. And so right in here it says, page 32, Raymond, the fourth child, was the only Clinton with any money or consistent involvement in politics. Raymond Jr. was the only one who was younger than I. He was also brighter. He literally became a rocket scientist with a distinguished career at NASA. So then it says, after the father's death, Raymond's kids decided with sadness that they had to sell the old house. Luckily, my library and foundation needed a retreat, so we bought the place and are renovating it for that purpose. So, I was living in Austin for 15 years, and here it is. I met him twice. This is the signed copy. So I met him. One time I gave him my card on Starlite, and he stuck it in his pocket. I shook his hand both times. Let's see. So the FAA mandated that, and it was in the news dozens and dozens of times. CNN, New York Times, LA Times, Seattle Post Intelligence, or etc., etc. So in 1998, what Boeing was going to have to do is take out all the insulation and put in new pieces. They're these pieces of insulation, and that's very expensive. So with Starlite, they could take it out, spray Starlite on, and then put it back. And so that's what it was tested for. But the executives at Boeing didn't want to make a deal with the inventor. They wanted to control everything. So they stole samples, and years later, I ended up talking to Dr. Raymond Clinton on the phone at least 10 times, and he told me that he had stolen samples, and he gave it to Dr. Eric Rice in Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama. What's the name of his company? I don't remember right now, but they had a lot of NASA contracts, and he had, so he tested it. His son lives in Austin, Texas. I'm in contact with him. I met both of them in person in Austin 10 years ago. So he had stolen samples and tested them. And then if you watch the Dateline NBC report with Stone Phillips and Jane Pauley from 1994, you can hear Rudy Naranjo as a NASA spokesperson saying, this could be really helpful to us. And then they show the space shuttle taking off, and the announcer says maybe Starlight can help with a fragile heat shield. So behind the scenes, that's what Starlight was tested for. And I've got this 4-page description from NASA of, I think this was written by Rudy Naranjo, of the history of working with NASA. So let's see. If they had gone with us, then Starlight would end up in every jet in the world in multiple ways. Let's see. The insulation in the MDs was super flammable, but the insulation in all the other jets was a little bit flammable and not fire resistant. And so if Starlight had been used on maybe all the jets, then certainly all the new ones in the last 10 or 15 years, it could have been done, then it creates a fireproof barrier throughout the hull. So if the jet crashes and then people survive and the fuel tanks blow up, then it'll keep the fire at bay for a longer period of time so people can escape. Another way it could be used in jets is intumescent paint. A Starlight is an intumescent material. It can either be spray on in a thin coating, or it could be mixed with paint and then sprayed on as a paint. And so all the jets in the world they all have paint. It could be intumescent and fireproof, so that when it crashes, that creates another external barrier. Then let's say in the UPS jet, it looks like the engine started to fall off, and that caused a leak of gasoline, which caught on fire. And so it was on fire for half of the runway. And with that much fire and wind, it's like a blowtorch, and it can burn right through the aluminum. So either that can cause an explosion that can rip the wing off, which the wing fell off. But there was a lot of different factors. So looks like the disintegrating engine may have thrown off debris, which destroyed another engine, so it didn't get off the ground. So it's likely that Starlite wouldn't have prevented this, but there's multiple scenarios where it could have been relevant to the plane getting off the ground and then having enough time to go around and land again if there's a fire. So if there had been a fire and the engine had not fallen off and it had gotten off the ground, then having Starlite paint could have prevented a problem. But what am I looking for here is I'm looking for just to simply sharing the idea of Starlite with as many people as you can. Pilots, flight attendants, control tower people, to just bring together a task force so that we can find out what the real truth is. Everything that I'm saying here is easy to confirm with dozens and dozens of documents online. So not only news, published news, Starlight's been in a dozen different news reports. I got in the news one time with Starlite, Fresno Public Radio, 6 years ago. You can find it at their website. They interviewed me, and they interviewed UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley students that were working on copying Starlite with a NASA JPL engineer in order to protect houses from fires. So they thought the secret formula is lost to the world, but then the news reporter talked to me, and I said, no, I have it. And I said, Boeing stole samples, copied them, and gave it to a company in Houston called Flame Seal, and then Boeing patented the same formula, the same 4 key ingredients. So in the audio of the Fresno Public Radio, you can hear me interviewed, and then in the text on the website, you can see the link to the Boeing patent. At the Boeing patent, down at the bottom, it says Flame Seal is listed as one company that has a similar product. So that's how I learned about Flame Seal. So Flame Seal received our stolen technology, and then they made an infomercial where you can hear the owner saying, somebody came to me with an invention that didn't work, and then I went to my laboratory and I made it work. That's called reverse engineering. And there's William Shatner's in the infomercial. He must have been paid in stock, so he may be a part owner of our stolen technology. Then they say, Boeing, we've got a contract, and it's going to go in all the Boeing jets, or a lot of Boeing jets. And so that was over 10 years ago. But after they worked with the FAA, there's FAA documents on the FAA website, hundreds of pages, a dozen different reports, directives, saying Boeing needs to replace the flammable insulation in thousands of jets, maybe hundreds of thousands. And they're working on a spray-on fireproofing that's going to get the job done and save a lot of money and time. So they delayed it for years. And then finally, it came out in the news, Flame Seal has perfected a spray-on fireproofing with FAA approval. John Hickey was involved. I contacted John Hickey, the deputy director of the fire safety branch at the FAA, and talked to him on the phone, and then he referred me to some of his engineers, and they gave me the runaround and then slammed the door. later I found out that they were working with Boeing on that. But then it never happened because I started contacting the FBI, maybe, and hundreds of congresspeople and senators and the people on the committees that oversee aviation safety, the senators and the congresspeople, and going to their offices and delivering in person, like Congressman Rohrabacher of California. But to no avail. It's easy to ignore one or two people working together, but it can all change. Okay, pilots. So, since 1998, approximately once a year, a big Boeing jet has crashed, and either it was caused by fire because somebody saw it was on fire, or it crashed, people survived, and they burned to death in the post-crash fire. So one example is 2000, I think, the Singapore Airlines jet crashed, a Boeing jet, and dozens of people burned to death. So one of the survivors, he went on Oprah years later, and he shared the whole story about watching the people burn up around him, and he saw light coming out of them going up. You can find that on YouTube. So, really interesting guy. He wrote a whole book about his life story, and I've met him because he's a good friend of mine that is helping me on this. So, he's here in Southern California also. So, but the seat cushions, the fabric that covers them, all of these things could be made fireproof. And they can increase the survival chances. So, Korean Airlines, was it Korean Airlines? In Korea, there was a crash almost a year ago now, and it hit a brick wall, but there was, I think, one or two survivors, and according to an insider who told me that his cousin was running the investigation in Korea, there was some survivors that burned to death. And that's why their autopsies have not come out yet. But that's not really highly confirmed. But there's dozens of other ones. So the Ethiopia Airlines crash that they blamed on the software, well, there was multiple witnesses on camera who said it flew over my head and it was on fire and there was smoke and maybe fire coming out of the back. So that was Christine Amanpour reported on that with Mary Schiavo, the aviation expert. That's on video somewhere. And then, let's see, it was in maybe a dozen different news outlets, but then it was immediately covered up. Let's see, John Nash, is that his name, at ABC, who's the aviation expert. Right after the crash, he said, well, it might have been fire because that's sometimes what happens, the total loss of control. Well, I talked to him personally and the other producers at ABC News, and I told them all about Starlite, and I sent them all the information, and they refused to report on it. So, dozens of times I've contacted news organizations, and they've refused, slammed the door. So, just 1 month ago, with the Jimmy Kimmel event, I got that one on video. NBC, Robert Kovacic, is that his name? Kovacic? So he was there, and there was a whole lineup of news people, and I said, if one of you will take this story and report on it, we can get the most important invention of all time in the news, and we could save a lot of lives. Those houses didn't have to burn down. There could be a thin coating of fireproof paint. Okay, it's not even offered or required or incentivized in the fire zones. Nobody's even heard of it. So, fireproof planes, fireproof homes. Okay, so he took the envelope with the story of Starlite and he said he would pass it on. Okay, but a month later, no action. You can find that on my YouTube channel. 2 or 3 years before, Phil Schumann at Fox News, I hand it to him. And my other most important stories of all time. 3 times I got him on video. 3 times, and he still has done nothing. So news organizations, they're all owned by the same people that own Boeing and actually PG&E, Hawaiian Electric, where they, malfeasance in 10 different ways, started a bunch of fires. Okay, all the insurance companies that withdrew from those zones, so people now, many of them can't even rebuild because they didn't have insurance, etc., etc. So it's a big ball of easily to verify factoids, all right, which keep most people's heads spinning, and they can't even comprehend it. But pilots, you are all, even though these things are rare, once a year. Okay, once a year is what I tracked and added up. I got a big, stack of, I printed them all out. But then you have the Airbus ones, which there's another 10 or 20. Then you have the helicopters and the small private jets. I'm aligning myself with pilots. All I'm asking you to do is just share the link to our YouTube channel. Maybe you could share a picture of the 2-page letter that share a link to this video. I'm going to be going to the local airport with a 2-page letter and passing it out to as many pilots as I can and flight attendants. And that's the only way this is going to change. Okay, so if you just send it out to 10 or 20 other pilots, and when you pass them in the airport, okay, anybody who joins the task force who can help will get a point. I set aside 10% of the company, and you'll become a part owner. If you share it with another person after you join the task force, you can get another point. Okay, and if you join the board of advisors, you can get another 10 points. Okay, there's a lot of different ways to get points, any kind of action. So let's see. What did I miss here? And 26 is the name of the installation. And so I'm aligning myself. I've gotten my information through to 5 presidents, and some of their staff loved the ideas and wanted to help, and the majority said no way. So I've got proof in 4 cases. So Trump got it through a friend of mine who knows his 2 sons, Trump Jr. and Eric, quite well, and they didn't want anything to do with it. So I find it quite ironic that he's endangering all the traveling Americans and putting all of you through so much stress. Okay, I mean, can you imagine the flight attendants and the pilots who have to think about, are they getting short-staffed down there? I mean, what, you think you're just a bunch of mindless robots, that this stuff doesn't weigh on you? Okay, so you need like some kind of bonus to make up for this stuff. So, but as long as we have a minute, there's a few other factors which in this special task force that could enhance airline safety. So, I did get through to one critical person, Victor Naro, at UCLA. So my father was a professor of medicine at UCLA for 35 years. He wrote this book, In 12 Weeks You Can Control Your High Blood Pressure Without Drugs. Published in 1984. Endorsed by the top expert in the world on high blood pressure, Dr. Norman Kaplan, professors at Harvard, UCLA, Stanford, University of Texas. So my dad got his start in that business at the Pritikin Longevity Center, where he was the founding medical director. They had a lot of pilots coming in because if your blood pressure gets too high, then you lose your license. And if you can't be taking a bunch of drugs, at least back then. And so they'd put them in a beautiful hotel to bring their stress down and exercise and eat right and eat a perfect diet, and they'd get off the drugs, okay, and get back to work. So separate issue of critical importance, okay, but the Pritikin Longevity Center is now in a Trump hotel on Miami Beach, the longest profitable residential healthy living program in the world. You can reverse most illnesses there. That's a critical topic for another video, another videos I have on my website. Okay, so I've been getting through to our leaders since 2003, both Starlite, my dad's book, which got into the White House in 2003, along with Starlite. Here's how to get everybody in America healthy and reverse most illnesses, okay, and all those heart attacks. Okay, they didn't want to have nothing to do with it. So Barr McClellan's 2 sons were in the White House. He's still a good friend of mine. He'll still testify. He's ready to talk and confirm this. So his son Scott was Bush's press secretary, Scott McClellan, and Dr. Mark McClellan was running the FDA and then Medicare and Medicaid. Okay, so everything I said so far is the tip of the iceberg. Okay, so, okay, so I'm aligning with people that are going to speak about this. Okay, so I've identified about 20 super celebrities who have like common, missions. So Paris Hilton is one of them. She had her house burned down at the beginning of this year, lost everything in Malibu. Then now she's in a new house, which is not fireproof. So I've got 10 different connections to her that are quite good. We're going to fireproof some celebrity houses. She has a jet that's not fireproof. Every single model of jet, the private jets that I've found, has had a crash where there was survivors and then some of them burned to death in the post-crash fire. For example, Travis Barker, he's a musician that was married to Kim Kardashian or something. It crashed. The fuel tanks exploded in a big fireball, and then a couple people that were alive, they burned to death. He and his bandmate had to walk through the flames. They could have had a fireproof blanket to roll out. Let's see what else. They could have had more time to escape through other routes if it was fireproof, the hull. But he got burns all over, like 2/3 of his body. Spent years recuperating. So he's connected to Paris Hilton. Taylor Swift is in a jet that's had crashes where people burn to death. A bunch of them. Oprah, the Gulf Stream. Let's see, who was Louis Katz was a billionaire owner of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and he had a Gulf Stream, and it crashed, went over past the end of the runway, burst into flames. A couple people, they all burned to death, actually, unfortunately. Let's see, then he was a good friend of President Clinton, ironically. If you listen to the funeral, the whole speech by Clinton, it'll just blow your mind. He said, it was his cousin and his inaction that this didn't get onto that jet. Okay, so he had said something like, Louis Katz, he would have said, go for it. Go for it, man. I don't know, I'm paraphrasing. But it just, what he said at the funeral just blew my mind. Anyway, Paris Hilton, I don't know if you know about her, but she's on a mission for the last couple of years to free hundreds of thousands of teens who are and kids who are getting overdrugged and abused in psych facilities and the foster system. So I've been working on that issue for 20 years. Again, the McClellan's mother, Carol Keaton Strayhorn, produced the Forgotten Children report in 2003. She was the comptroller of Texas. Big, thick report. It said kids in foster care are getting 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 different drugs in crazy combinations when the cause of their symptoms of depression or whatever is that they're in horrific living conditions, some of them getting abused. So she tried to fix it. Her sons didn't fix that either. They slammed the door on their mom. So 20 years later, their mom was, I talked to Bar McClellan a couple months ago. Their mom was dying from bad medical care, and their stepmother, Bar's second wife, was dying from bad medical care. All seniors getting drugs that didn't work, and now they just died a couple months ago, unfortunately. So separate issue, but we're getting in this project, we're going to get into the heart of the medical system, what's wrong with it, and also what's going on with Starlite. Okay, so I'm going to use the story of Starlite to get in the news and shine a spotlight on cures for critical health problems. So I've got a huge library from the best health experts like Dr. Dean Ornish at UC San Francisco, The End of Alzheimer's, written by Dr. Dale Bredesen. I've been speaking to him for over 2 years at UCLA. So let's see. But I'm joining forces with a couple key celebrities, but we need some backup from a group of pilots. Okay, so everybody flies, everybody travels, all right? Even though it only happens to once a year, that's enough to strike fear into those who know what's going on. So let me see what else I need to get to here. Right here, Chuck Norris. I went to kindergarten through 5th grade, then high school with Eric and Mike Norris. Mike is looking at it right now in my Facebook group. Okay, here's me. Right there. Then is Mike Norris right here. Then it is Eric Norris. Sorry, I didn't point to the other ones. Right there. So I talked to Eric 10 years ago. He's a stunt coordinator. He was on Hawaii Five-0 for a long time as the stunt director, and he had a major accident where he got badly burned. So I've been working on the family for that long. Chuck Norris, I visited his ranch 2 or 3 years ago in Houston and dropped off some of my proposals for them to consider. So these are the kind of people I've been lining up to deal with a series of issues. So regarding the air traffic controllers, you guys are way understaffed. What really needs to happen is a radical increase in your salary. Let me just give you a few items before I end this, okay? So the stress will make you sick over time. So, and having a mission mentality, especially if you've been in the military, will make you ignore your own needs and jeopardize your health and the safety of, the public, okay, by ignoring that your stress is going higher and not saying enough is enough. So let me add all of my knowledge and these health experts to a task force to straighten out our leaders and get things going right. Your income probably needs to increase by maybe 50%. I don't know exactly what the number is. That'll attract more people, invite people to come back. They get a bonus too who have retired. to come back part-time and reduce the load. And if you work less hours, that's not going to cut your pay. You're still going to get paid as much or more. So that'll increase the numbers of people that are working there. And let's see. I'm just brainstorming here, but looking at the accident in the UPS accident, I saw that it went by the control tower and it was already fully on fire. And so it made me wonder if they had close-up, high-definition cameras with infrared sensors all along the runway, and then you have people in the control tower or nearby that are watching it, and then if there's any sign of a fire, they can say, stop. It could have been maybe stopped if they had gotten the message, a couple hundred feet prior. Number two, the runway in that case could have been extended significantly. If that entire, where they had a bunch of buildings that got destroyed, if that had all been an extended runway. So I say there needs to be a stand down and look at all the airports and see where you can extend the runway so that if something like that happens, they have more opportunity to stop. So I've mentioned Victor Naro. He's a professor of law at UCLA who I got in contact with over a year ago. Told him all about Starlite, sent him a bunch of documents. He's on the board. He's a commissioner for the Los Angeles airport, appointed by Mayor Bass of Los Angeles, and he's one of a few commissioners. So he wanted to help me to set up a thing to expedite this technology over a year ago at UCLA, and then he started getting cold feet, which is totally understandable. Then the fires hit, okay, in which a bunch of his colleagues lost their homes. Back to NASA JPL, they lost over 100 homes of people working there. I contacted over a year ago. There's an investigation going on at NASA JPL for over 3 years, and federal investigation because our stolen technology ended up with a guy by the name of James Mosley, and he started trying to sell it over 10 years ago, and he was in the news and everything. And I contacted him over 10 years ago, and I tried to work with him, and he wouldn't. And I said, that's probably a knockoff. Okay, I know it gets complicated. Okay, I'm going to try to do a more detailed story in the near future. Okay, but then he got sued by the NASA JPL and the Los Angeles and Santa Barbara city prosecutors, attorney generals, and charged with fraud. You can't claim that this came from NASA because it didn't. Well, I would have testified that it did because it was stolen. Okay, and in fact it turned out finally that it has at least one ingredient the same as Starlite. Okay, so he got all through the courts, and now they ended up with a $3 million judgment against him, bankrupting him. It's all in the news, multiple news reports. Okay, so I contacted the federal investigator at NASA JPL over a year ago, spoke to him on the phone multiple times, sent him all the documents. He told me he contacted Dr. Raymond Clinton at NASA and confirmed that they were involved, but they're not going to do anything about it. After 100 homes burned down of their colleagues, I contacted them again, but still they're not going to do anything. Okay, so it's these things like this. They can ignore one person, all right? But they can't ignore 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 pilots, right? So what else before I get cut off? I'm about to get cut off any minute. Okay, let's see. The news people, the Congress people and senators. So my local congressman here, Takano, is that his name? Okay, I've been contacting him for almost a year, and his staff, and sending emails and getting receipts. So then there's one down in Long Beach who he's on the committee that oversees aviation safety, so I've been contacting his staff for almost a year, is because they were all involved after the Conception fire. That was a fire off Santa Barbara where maybe 10 people burned to death in a boat, where Starlite might have helped. See, all in the inside is all wood and it had veneer on it, and so Starlite has already been mixed with veneer in multiple products that are available on the market, and so it could have been fireproof in there. So I've been contacting the Congress people who they wrote a bill to try to improve safety, but they've been giving me the runaround too. Okay, there's one more, a congressperson in Texas who I'm working on reaching. So my next video will be all about that. I've got a very, very, very good connection to him, which will be totally unstoppable in the next week. Let's see. So, bottom line is this. It takes like 1 minute to share this with like 10 or 20 people. But let me tell you this also. You guys face death every day, so this may not mean anything to you. I mean, you don't really face death, but I mean, you're at risk. Uh-oh, I gotta go.